I've been working on building a new kind of math input using JavaScript. If you type into Desmos something like f of x equals x plus 1, this math input right here is powered by a tool called MathQuill. MathQuill is nice, but it's a little bit old and out of date, and the developer experience is not so good, and so I think we should build a better JavaScript library for this. I made a previous video about that. In this example here, this is really nothing fancy. It's basically just a regular input with a font because it's just plain editing left to right. If I move my cursor through, I just have a list of characters and that's it. If I were to do something like a power of 3, that is a little fancier, but this is still something that you could type into like Microsoft Word or Google Docs without using the equation editor because the 3 is just a superscript, and that's essentially just a setting that you can apply to a font, right? So I could just as easily type like x 3 plus 1 and then put a superscript on this, and that would have the effect of being a power of 3. The real sort of difference, the thing that makes this node editing special, is when you start to add things like fractions. So for example, if I take x plus 1 and divide it by 2, now I have this fraction shape. This is not regular text. This is very clearly something different where I have this fraction node embedded within my input, and then I have other sort of content inside the fraction. And so this node-based editing is what we're trying to build. I can make it even a little fancier by doing something like cube root of x plus 1, and now I have nodes within nodes. We're trying to build a node editor. That's what we want to do. My first attempt at building something like this, where you're trying to represent a sort of complicated node input like this, was to build some kind of like tree, essentially representing each node with its subnodes. So I said we're going to have some kind of root node that's like your input. Inside of there, we have a fraction. Inside the fraction, we have a denominator, and the denominator is 2. Uh, we also have a numerator. Inside the numerator is a radical node, like a root basically. And then inside that radical, we have the index, which happens to be 3, and the radicand, which is x plus 1. And so you've got this tree structure. I highlighted in green the nodes at the bottom that are like the leaf nodes of the tree, and those leaf nodes are essentially still just text. Like they're just inputs that you type into. However, the big thing when you're making an editor is dealing with how the cursor moves, and when you're looking at it like a tree like this, I think it's kind of hard to see what's going on. So I have this alternate visualization. This is the exact same thing, but it's showing how the nodes are nested within each other. So I actually built a demo of how you can move your cursor around here. So this is the live version. As you can see, there's a preview of what we're actually typing, and then down below is sort of the node view. And if I hit the left and right arrow keys on my keyboard, you can see the cursor move through the nodes at the bottom in a way that sort of makes sense, right? Like as you move left and right within a leaf, your cursor just moves left and right. If you move out of the leaf, you pop out into the previous node, and then you can go back into the next node. And so you're sort of weaving in and out of different nodes, navigating this tree structure. However, you'll see there are some places where it doesn't quite make sense to allow your cursor, like right here, in between the 3 and the x plus 1. It makes sense here where it's at the end of the 3. It makes sense here at the beginning of the x plus 1. Right in the middle doesn't make sense. Same with the fraction, in between the numerator and denominator, or after the denominator, or before the numerator, but still inside the fraction, doesn't really make sense. This problem is actually fairly solvable just by disallowing certain cursor positions, but there's an even bigger issue here. The way we modeled it, we expect each node to have these subnodes, like this fraction with a numerator and denominator, but you can only have one node as a child. So for example, it was okay to have a cube root as the numerator and just a leaf node with 2 as the denominator. But over here on the right, if I want to have multiple separate nodes or a list of nodes as children of the numerator, that's not really an option. And so as I was writing the code for this, the sort of easy, obvious solution was to do something like React did, which is just slap on the concept of like a fragment, right? Where it's like the nothingness node that's just a node that contains other children. Uh, but as soon as I added that, things got messy. As you can see, I added a slot node. So for example, the fraction has 2 slots, a slot for the numerator and a slot for the denominator. and those slots can contain multiple things if needed. The problem with that is it's really big and bulky. So I can show you the live demo of this. As you can see, there's a lot going on. It does work now. I can move left and right within here. I can also select things if I want to. It all works, but our issue of cursor positions that don't make sense has gotten even worse. Because, for example, if I'm at the beginning of the radical or the beginning of the slot containing the radical, down here you can see my cursor is in two different positions in the tree, but visually it's the same thing, and it doesn't really make sense that when I press the right arrow, nothing actually happens up here. This should really only be one thing. And so this got me dealing with a whole bunch of sort of annoying, messy work trying to figure out where is the cursor allowed to be or not allowed to be. I did come up with a solution that works. If I go in here, I came up with some rules about certain nodes have rules for whether or not you're allowed to put the cursor there. And so, for example, now, if I hit the right arrow, I skip over the fraction node. I can't put my cursor in between these. And I go to the beginning of the slot. And then I go, again, skip the radical node, but go inside the slot. But now if I'm inside a slot like this, it doesn't make sense to put my cursor at the beginning of a leaf. However, it does make sense to go inside the leaf. And so there's a whole bunch of logic sort of skipping around and picking only the positions that make sense. Unfortunately, as I went through this, it just sort of felt like a tangled nightmare. Like it's not really a good setup for doing this. And so I have a new concept. Unfortunately, that concept is not quite ready yet. I have the idea, but I haven't implemented it. So more next time.